For that song in particular, the original version of it was just Chester singing. We were talking about that song. It had a missing element, and I think the idea of having a female voice came up as dynamic in so many different ways. You know, to add counterpoint to the perspective of the song, to create a dynamic in what we're hearing. I think this song was just asking for it, so it just became an obvious next step to go to.
Yeah.
And I think also in general, when we were looking to collaborate with people, it was pretty open for the community. And I think one area was let's get new cool people, right? Let's not necessarily like get like, you know, like the people that are hanging in the walls here, you know. Let's just like see like we're trying to do something new, so let's get people that like have that freshness.
Well, I think we were really encouraged along the way with the results of kind of approaching the songwriting from this vantage point from early on, and it really was like I don't want to say struggle, because that's like too painful a word. Like there was an effortlessness to it. However, there was also a real kind of wrestling with the material and finding our way. And I think that by the very end of the process, when we had all the songs laid out in a sequence, like Joe and I had a conversation about, wow, it really kind of does tell a story. And that wasn't our intention. We really wrote out each of these songs as a standalone idea. And I think because they were all written from a certain kind of emotional place, that there's some kind of narrative that unfolded in a very organic way.
I think at a certain point for me, and it was probably right around the Minutes to Midnight writing process, I felt like a shift in my thinking of Linkin Park doesn't need to be any sound. Like we even started off really early on with Hybrid Theory saying like, which was true, we like these different genres, we want to do them in a way that we're not hearing. We want to present different elements in styles in ways that we're not hearing anybody else do. Why don't we do that? You know, we've grown up with all these different influences. Why don't we incorporate those in our own way? Kind of opening that door of why don't we just put whatever we like into something and present that in our own way? But it wasn't until we're writing Minutes to Midnight where I felt like Linkin Park's sound is whatever the six of us are gravitating towards, period.
Yeah.
Like, I can't define it in my brain any other way. I can't hone in on, oh, it's, you know, it's a combination of this, this, and this, or even just if this one element is there, then it's like, then that can be a song of ours. Or it was like, no, it's whatever we're gravitating towards, whatever kind of grabs your ear, whatever makes your hand stand or your hair stand up in your arm, like that's gonna be Linkin Park, I guess. Like in my head, I'm like,
do spontaneously do handstands when I like something, though.
whatever makes you do a handstand.
In terms of the maturity, like it is a snapshot in time. Like when I look at pictures of myself during the Hybrid Theory era, I was like, man, like I was so confused. Like I had no idea who I am, let alone who I wanted to be. There's like an honesty and an aggression that was very true to like who we were at that time. So there was a real honesty and like a very authentic element of what was going on and how we viewed the world. And like each album is a different place, and like each album also assumes a new, slightly different version of ourselves, a more mature version of ourselves, one that's grown and had more experiences. But each one is an authentic expression of who we were at that time, and I don't think we could have written any one of those records at any other moment. Like that is exactly what was supposed to be at that time. And this is a really perfect, this record is, I feel confident in saying, this is exactly who we are now. This is what we're interested in now. This is how we feel now. and this is what's getting us out of bed creatively.
Well, I mean, we're not like we're not a factory, right? We're not like we're not making sausage. We're not making McDonald's cheeseburgers. Like, it's like a weird, amorphous kind of wandering process. And I think that for me, showing people some of the humanity of that, like showing some of the struggle, like, hey, this is the best idea. How I've posted these clips so many times where I'm like, check this out, this is so cool, look what I made, and blah, blah, blah. And then like a week later, it's like, no, that idea was actually terrible. We're not using that on the album. It's cut, we muted it, it's done. And that's the reality of making music, is like, or being an artist in general, is you make stuff and 1 minute it's the greatest thing in the world, and the next minute it's like garbage, you know? So that's just the reality of it. I feel like especially for as long as our albums can take sometimes, like it's yeah, those are moments in time. Like the release of an album for us is like a really big deal. Simultaneously, like the relationship between Linkin Park and the fans is not an event-based relationship. Like, it's an ongoing communal relationship that's always happening. So whether we have an album out or not, like, we're still, you know, tied in with the fans.
Yeah, I mean, we're Linkin Park. We're obviously a global band and travel all around the world, and we have fans all over the world. So we wanted connection, as Mike was just saying. We've been talking about like today it's super important to us. So we want to be as connected as we can to our fans all over the place. So the global ambassador, we actually have fans in specific regions to help us translate. So that language is not a barrier between communicating with our fans. And you know, from the very, very beginning, like the first shows we played, somebody told us very early on just about thinking about that. And I'm glad they did, because it was something that we got a lot of satisfaction out of, which was making a connection with our fans after we played. And so these are the first shows, like we're literally like loading our gear in, playing a show, and then like loading it out, and then we're going to our merch booth and selling our own merchandise. And when we were doing that, we started, you know, got the feedback, we got that connection, like, hey man, like that song you played, you know, what was the third song to the last, you know, before the end of the set? That there's something about that, and they would talk to us, and we started to have this dialogue. And so, you know, our fans like give us the opportunity to do what we do. If nobody was listening to our music, like we could be making music, but no one's listening, there would be no Linkin Park, there would be no world tours. It would be like, we've had so much opportunity because of that relationship. And I know that it's really important to us to remember that. Like, it started in clubs, it started getting the feedback, because we had a really tough time getting signed to a record label. And it was our fans that kept telling us, like, you guys are doing something incredible. I mean, we thought we were, but like, you know, if the labels all told us that they didn't want to sign us and we didn't have the fans there, there's no way we would have kept going. So they kept like, encouraging us and giving us all of that kind of life and energy that we needed to push forward. And so that's something that's always been part of the fabric of what makes Linkin Park. And so we're always talking, that conversation's always alive, and we're always talking about how we can give back to our fans and make sure, and also listening to like what they're up to and what they want from our world.
I know that I would say that the thing that is the most, almost like this, entertaining to me is what a cool variety of artists and people, but artists in particular who have said that Linkin Park played some role in their musical like development, right? Whether that's Ollie from Bring Me the Horizon, who I think he said like the first time he was ever in this one particular rock magazine, like they interviewed him once he was in a band that was doing well. And they're like, oh, it's your first time in the magazine. And he's like, actually, I've been in the magazine before. I was in the front row at my first concert, a Linkin Park concert, and I was in your magazine as a fan. And he's like, that was my first show, and it was like the reason I wanted to be in a band. And so like a story like that, it's like, we're obviously just like so grateful for the opportunity to do what we do, but also like these people who are so clearly talented on their own, from Kiara to him to so many others that have said, oh, you know, I love this music. Like, that's like, we were in their shoes, we pass it on to them, they will pass it on to somebody else. Like, that's how music, that's how it works, right? Like, I got to work with Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin made most of the top 10 records that are my favorite albums of all time, right? So And I get to tell him that, and he lets me play the 808 drum machine that he used on Run DMC and Beastie Boys. And I'm sitting there touching it, going like, this needs to be in a museum, and I'm playing it. Like, that's cool, right? That's the way it gets passed down.
Yeah, by the way, I run the Grammy Museum. Be happy to take that off his hands.
He literally said, he said, I said, can we get the 808 machine? Do you have like an old 808 that we can borrow for the album? And he's like, oh, you know what? I had the one that I used to make all those old records with in the 80s. And when I moved to LA, like, I don't know where it ended up. Like, it may have ended up in storage somewhere or maybe lost. And I'm like, I was just like, oh, okay. Like, if you happen to find it, like, let us know so we'll use it. And if not, we'll rent one. But they're a little hard to find. Yeah. And he's like, the next time he came in, he's like, oh, I found that drum machine. And he's like, here. I was like, oh, it's in like in a closet.
Yeah.
Really?
We need to go to Rick's house.
I said to him, how many of these did you have? Like, is this the one, or did you have a few of them? He's like, no, I only had one. You literally had to punch it to get it to start. Like, the button was that stuck. You had to slam your fist down on it.